I like to start everything with a fun little poem that I have that just kind of illustrates what I'm all about. And this is just a little poem called Taxes. Taxes land, taxes bed, taxes table, at which he's fed. Taxes tractor, taxes mule. Teach him taxes are the rule. Taxes work, taxes pay. He works for peanuts. Anyway, taxes cow, taxes goat, taxes pants, taxes coat, taxes ties, taxes shirt, taxes work, taxes dirt, taxes tobacco, taxes drink, tax him if he tries to think, taxes cigars, taxes beers, if he cries, then taxes tears, taxes car, taxes gas, find other ways to tax his ass. Tax all he has, then let him know that you won't be done until he has no dough. When he screams and hollers, then tax him some more, tax him till he's good and sore. Then tax his coffin, tax his grave, tax the sod in which he's laid. Put these words upon his tomb, taxes drove me to my doom. When he's gone, do not relax. It's time to apply the inheritance tax. I love this little poem because it really does illustrate, I don't know, I think it's the mindset that our government has. It's just a power thing about taxing people. You know, anyway, it's the reason this country is flailing about the way that it is because truthfully, the people in this great nation do have a tremendous tax burden that they did not have 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 100 years ago, when this nation was the most prosperous nation on the planet. But I'm here because I'm a candidate for Lake County Property Appraiser, and I'm going to show you how that kind of ties in. Basically, I like educating people as to how the system works, because everything is a system. I'd like to start with this org chart, which is basically the Lake County General Fund goes and funds all of this. Okay, so you have the Lake County voters at the top, and I really thought it was interesting. I pulled this right off the government website. I thought it was very interesting that they put voters and not citizens. So that was just interesting to me. And then you have the constitutional officers, the Board of County Commissioners, and the county judges. So that's kind of the next tier of hierarchy. So all of these folks respond directly to the voter, okay? So the voters are their boss. And then you have the constitutional officers, which the constitutional officers are the clerk of courts, the property appraiser, the sheriff, the supervisor election, and the tax collector. Those are your constitutional officers. So the property appraiser is the constitutional officer who is a direct employee of the Lake County voters. Okay, so that's kind of how it works. My understanding is that each and every one of the constitutional officers is up for re-election this year. Lake County has a problem fielding good candidates because for the most part, Lake County has always been a Republican county, always. So if you're a Republican candidate, you're going to win. And what happens is once you get the constitutional officers in, then they tend to stay in because they were elected as Republican, and then they just keep continuing on. Just for an example, your current property appraiser, Mr. Ed Havill, has actually been in office for 36 years. And he's been there so long, he's actually retired once. In 2008, he retired with the DROP program, and I don't know, are you familiar with the DROP program? Legislatively, it was meant for the schools, not really for all government officials, but they found a way, okay, to use the system to their advantage. So what the DROP program is, it's a 60-month period of time that you declare that you're going to retire within 60 months. Okay, and then at the end of that period of time, you're supposed to retire. Now, you can retire and you can stay out. At one time, it was 30 days, and then you just come back in at another position. You're still going to get your retirement, and then you get your full pay again. And that's what Mr. Havill did. He actually strategically retired in 2008. His official drop date was not until 2009. But he did strategically, he planned this, okay? He strategically retired in 2008, right after he was elected, after not being opposed. So you see, Lake County has a huge issue about fielding candidates, because someone in the Republican Party should have noticed that he was in the drop program and at least fielded a different candidate, because he ran completely unopposed. That means he's in. And so what he did is after he was on the ballot and after the election, he did strategically retire. And he retired at the end of November, so he was re-elected the 2nd of November, and then he retired at the end of that month. Then he stayed out for 30 days, and then the 1st of January, boom, he's right back into office and making $131,000 a year. So right now he's currently receiving his retirement benefits from the state of Florida, which are roughly $77,000, and then he's getting his full pay of $131,000. And he's going to continue doing that if he's reelected. He's running again, okay? So it's going to take a monumental effort to get this man out. Let me give you a little bit of what a taste of what it's like to be a candidate against this particular person, okay? This particular person has a lot of power. He's the one that tells you how much your property is worth and therefore how much you pay in taxes. As I have gone around trying to get petitions signed, because in order to have your name put on the ballot here in Lake County, for this particular position, you have to have 1,900 plus signatures, from almost 2,000 signatures by registered voters to get your name on the ballot. And then you have a certain time frame to which to do this, okay? My particular problem has been that a lot of the people who are big, well-known people in this county refuse to put their name on anything because they know that Mr. Havill will come after them and raise their taxes. So you basically have somebody who's been in office for 36 years. He's got a lot of power, and he is not embarrassed at all to use it. I have talked to numerous people since I've become a candidate, and they will whisper in my ear things that they cannot tell in public, because he's still in office, and he still has a lot of power to put the hurt on them. Just for an example, I have over here, and he has, right now he's got at least 12 to 13 outstanding lawsuits, open lawsuits. If you just Google the court of records and you find out how many lawsuits this man's been in, it's been a lot. Because when he runs into people, sometimes people think that, you know, okay, I'll go to circuit court and we'll sue. But the problem is that he's been in office for so long that he knows a lot of the judges and them are friends too. Just Google his name, you'll see a few things about why him and the judges are friends. But let me just bring your attention to this one. This could have possibly been a lawsuit because the Value Adjustment Board actually did overturn this. But it's a shame that it got to this point. This is a church up in Houston, the Epiphany Church, and they obviously get a tax exemption because they're a church, and that was never in dispute. But what happened is they missed the deadline for filing the appropriate paperwork because the church secretary had a stroke. So when they got their tax bill of $12,000, they did go to Mr. Havill's office and say, you know, what did we do wrong? And then that's when it came to light that, oh, you know, there's a stack of papers on her desk. She had a stroke and she just never got these turned in. But instead of saying, okay, you know, let's work this out, Mr. Havill's office took the position, no, sorry, too bad, you said you owe $12,000. There is a process where they can go and seek to have it overturned. It's called the Value Adjustment Board. The Value Adjustment Board is comprised of 5 people, and 3 of them are your county commissioners, and then there's 2 private citizens. So the Value Adjustment Board is still kind of like the people who are taxing you are the same ones that you're going to ask for relief. So that's kind of an iffy issue right there. But they did see their way into overturning this. I think it's because some of them are up for re-election right now. They didn't want this coming out. But Generally, everything that the property appraiser does is dictated by the Constitution and the Florida statutes. I'm talking the Florida Constitution. The Florida Constitution is right here, and basically it lays out the property taxation process, because basically it's a process. And basically what happens is, say for example, you buy your property, and that sets the rate. And then the Constitution takes over from there. So whatever you pay for the property, generally they're supposed to take out 15%, so you're only supposed to be assessed on 85% of that, and that's in the Constitution as well, because they're supposed to take out fees for, the commissions and all the general fees. You're not supposed to pay taxes on top of other taxes. And that was one problem that I had when I looked at the situation, is Lake County for several years had an almost $10,000 impact fee on all new homes. Well, they were taxing that in the property tax, which I thought that was an issue. I mean, I don't understand why people have to pay tax on top of tax, but they were doing it because I verified with them. I said, what about this $9,000 impact fee? Well, they pay tax, they pay property tax on that. So you're basically paying tax on a tax. Which I think the Constitution would not have wanted. I think that's why they specifically put that in there. But of course, they can't think of everything. But legislation would have to be enacted in order to take out those types of fees. Another thing about the Constitution is once you're homesteaded, so say you buy your property and they take out the 15%, so you're paying property taxes on 85% of what you bought it for. Then the Constitution kicks in and says that they can only go up 3% per year, or the difference in the CPI, which this past year was 1.5%. So if you got your trim notice, which is basically what tells you what your value of your property is, if you get your trim notice in and it's above 1.5%, basically the government's stealing from you. But good luck trying to get them to fix it, because they have what's called the presumption of correctness by the legislature. So if you try and take it to court or anywhere, even the VAB, magistrates, and I have the 600 petitions were filed this past year, which that process alone cost the Lake County taxpayer upwards of $43,000 just to have that process. But the magistrates just basically rubber stamp everything because there is the presumption of correctness given to the property appraiser by the legislature. So anyway, here's your trim notice. Now, the thing about the trim notice is basically it just tells you what your assessed values are, and then what percentage of that the taxing authorities are going to be asking for. Because basically the property appraiser just sets the value. It's the taxing authorities that are the ones that actually take and spend your money. Now those people are listed on your trim notice under taxing authorities right here on the front. And over the years, the legislature has tried to get the property appraisers to put more information on this, because if you look back at some of the older trim notices, a lot of this information was either obscured or very hard to understand. So they keep trying to make it more understandable. But these people here don't really want you to know. You know what I'm saying? So basically, the way it's supposed to work is the government is here, right? Here's your government. And basically, you pay your taxes to them. And then the trim notice is supposed to go out, and you're supposed to be the good little trooper and just pay and not question anything. That's basically what they want, the government wants. But what you really should be doing is when you get your trim notice is you should be looking at these taxing authorities, and you should be questioning where they're spending your money. The school board is one of the biggest taxing authorities here in this county, and them and the county itself get the vast majority of your funds. And plus, over the last 15 years, the number of taxing authorities has increased. We didn't used to have this many taxing authorities, but somehow they just keep creeping along. I don't know how that works. works, but I guess I was asleep or something, maybe raising my family, working, I don't know. But these taxing authorities used to have crept up, so now there's more and more taxing authorities that used to not be there. So anyway, I think it would be imperative for patriots to start watching these taxing authorities and demanding to know where they spend every single penny of your money. The Lake County School Board is one of the largest tax getters of this county, and our schools are failing. You know, so where are they spending these massive amounts of money? Now, let me tell you something else about the school board that bothers me, okay, or any of these taxing authorities. But these other taxing authorities are kind of quiet right now because they run for re-election every couple of years. So, like the Lake County Journal, they don't really go after raising it so much because they're worried about keeping their jobs. But the school board always is making mention of another $500,000, another $500,000. Oh, we need another $500,000 for the schools. So let me tell you about the taxes, okay? And what they'll do is they'll whitewash it with, well, you know, it's only an extra $50 for the average homeowner here in Lake County. Is how they kind of try and pass it. Because, you know, who's not going to want to give an extra $50 to improve the schools in Lake County? But the problem with that is, and one of the problems that I really see as being a huge issue in Lake County, is that one of the largest payers of taxes in this county is the electric company. So if they raise the millage, you're just going to pay higher electric bills. You know, and if you have a business in Lake County and you have to rely on electricity to keep your doors open, well, there goes your cost of doing business. Why does anybody think that businesses are closing up here in Lake County and other areas as well? It's because of the taxes. Because once you raise the taxes in one area, then, you know, your electric bill is going to be higher, your phone bill is higher. Those are the largest paying taxpayers in this county, which is really sad, okay? Really, really sad. The largest employers in Lake County are the school board and the hospitals, none of which pay taxes. Okay? So what you have a home ownership tax base and then a sprinkling of businesses. And that's what's supporting this huge government. And let me tell you something about government. Is the bigger it gets, the worse service it provides to the voters. Let me give you a recent experience. I actually own 4 pieces of property now. My business is Superior Interiors by Pam Lee. So I've been in construction pretty much all my life. So construction is what I know and love. And owning property is a part of that. Okay? I just recently bought property in Sumter County. So I went, of course, since I'm a candidate for Lake Property Appraiser, I want to go see what that property appraiser's office is like. Okay, our property appraiser here in Lake County has 35 employees and a $2 million budget. Okay, they have 20 employees and a $1 million budget. The service there is unbelievable. I mean, the service that you get is, it's just like night and day going in their office versus going in this Lake County office, because this office is too big now. You know, talk about too big to fail. This is too big to get any services out of. My experiences with Lake County Property Appraiser is if you call up and you have a question, they go, well, that's not my department, and then they hang up on you. You know, that's not my department, hang up. You know, I finally called them back and I said, give me a list of every single person and what their department is, because I'm tired of playing this game. You know? And I'm like, if I was a business and I treated you this way, I'd be out of business in a heartbeat. You can tell that government has no clue how to serve the people, because it's not a business to them. It's just a job. They go in, they punch the clock, they get a nice, huge benefits, and they walk away. It's just astounding. But little bitty old Sumter County, who, by the way, is the most prosperous county in the nation right now. Interesting. They have really low taxes. They have small government, and they give great service, and they're the most prosperous county in the country. Interesting, isn't that? You know, meanwhile, Lake County is losing businesses like crazy. One of the things that really scares me about Lake County is some of the businesses, especially the retail businesses. Retail businesses are having a tough go right now, a really, really tough go.
The Coles that's up in Lady Lake pays $93,000 in property tax. Okay, so you think about that. If you're a retail operation and you know that you owe $93,000 in property taxes before you even sell one piece of merchandise to a customer, and customers are shopping around and they can shop at Penny's or Kohl's or Bell's or wherever, you know, it's really tight right now and they don't have very large margins. So I'm scared that what's going to start happening is if we as a county don't get our government under control and they keep raising taxes, businesses cannot survive. They're going to be closing their doors, and there go the few jobs that we have in this county that aren't actually government jobs. It's kind of scary when you look at the employment, and most of the employment is by people who are being paid by taxpayers such as yourself. You know, and business is not coming to Lake County because of the way that they are treated, because the government bureaucracy is too big. Okay? That's why they look around and go, well, you know, Sumter County, they're not so big. Polk County, they're easier to deal with. Even Volusia County and some of the other counties are so much easier to deal with. Like I said, I'm in construction and I work all the counties. But I will tell you that a lot of other construction people like myself that have construction businesses have told me time and time again that Lake County is the most difficult county of all the surrounding counties to get their permitting done and actually do work here in Lake County. That's what's preventing the growth in Lake County, is the size of your government and the way they treat people. Okay, because if you're in construction, which is basically the basis for all growth, okay, growth doesn't occur until somebody comes up with the idea, puts the money up front, and makes it happen. Okay, the government's not there handing anybody any money, saying, "Oh, here, build these houses." You know, I mean, unless you're, you know, it's under one of these development growth things. I mean, they do. There's a whole big. If you start looking and doing some research, you'll find all kinds of scandals about that. When the tornado came through, and then they got HUD money to rebuild the trailers, and then they went to people who actually work for the county. So, I mean, it's a rat's nest up there. So it's going to take some citizens getting actively involved in this entire situation, because believe me, they don't want you to know about how things work. For example, one of the things they hide from you is your full-blown record card, okay? Because with the trim notice, you have they keep records of your property, okay? It's a county record card. What they have on the website is they have half your record card, and if you ask them for your record card, they'll just direct you to the website, okay? They told me one time, they said, "We don't want people to see this," because I accidentally stumbled upon this while I was doing some research, and I went, "Oh, isn't that interesting?" And they were like, "Well, we don't want people to see that." Why don't they want people to see this? Because it's got the appraiser's notes on it. It's got the entire history of your property. Okay, if you saw what they did, some people might want to question it. For example, I've owned my property here in Groveland for 20 years. All right, been homesteaded all this time. Well, when I finally got my full-length record card with all the property notes on it, the way that they adjusted my property to keep up with the false bubble that burst, because the property appraiser's like, "Oh, look, property values went up." Well, I mean, I read the Constitution a little bit differently than they do, but that's a whole other thing. But because it says they're not supposed to go up unless it's a cash buyer, and it says no funny business with the marketing and the financing and all that, which for the bubble to be created, that's what was going on. So in my mind, the Constitution was prohibiting them going up. But in order for them to keep up with the quickly rising, values of homes, and to make sure they're getting their money out of the deal, they were actually going in and changing the quality grades and location grades of the homes so that they can make the numbers match. And I have their handbook, which directs them to do that. And it says if you want, and their handbook actually states that if you want this number, then you need to go in and you need to change the quality grade and the location grade to these numbers, and then this is what pops out of the computer. So they go in and they just arbitrarily make changes. I mean, you've had the same house for 20 years, you haven't done anything to it, you haven't changed a darn thing, and all of a sudden your location grade, your quality grade just got boosted right up. Okay, that's because the next door neighbor bought the place for 10 times what it was worth, and now it's a foreclosure. It happened to me, the house behind me. They paid way, way, way too much for it, probably 3 times what it was really worth. And then, you know, a couple months later, they walked out, and then now it's a foreclosure. But my taxes were adjusted based on the fact that this person paid way too much for it. But anyway, I suggest to you that you get a hold of this. I mean, they will give it to you if you demand it. But go in and ask them for your long-form record card and keep track of that like you would your credit score. And then that way, if they change it from year to year, I would suggest getting it annually, and that way they can't go around changing stuff without you knowing about it. Okay, that's what's going to take to get the government to kind of straighten up and not be so clandestine and all that with what they do. And I think it's imperative that we get into the budget. For example, the legislature said that the budget has to be posted on their website, right? Well, you would think that would be the entire budget. They don't. They have the budget summary. You know, and then you ask them, well, you know, the legislature says you're supposed to post your budget online. Oh, well, we do. No, that's the budget summary. Same thing to them. You know, to a taxpayer like me, no, it's not the same thing. I had to go in and pay 15 cents a copy for it. Not only do I pay taxes for this, now I got to go in and pay for copies on something that should be posted on the website. The Constitution basically has that the appraisal should be done in a uniform manner, and actually the Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice is what's demanded in Florida Statute 475628. Okay, so they're supposed to be using professional standards. And then there's the ethics rule. One of the things about this USPAP is the first thing when you start looking through it, it talks a lot about ethics and how important ethics are in this entire process. Now, I'm sorry, but somebody who double dips, to me, is not being ethical. But that's just me, okay? You may have a different opinion, but that's just me. But anyway, the way that the appraisal process works, whether it's by the government or whether it's by a private individual, is there's the cost approach, the sales comp approach, and then there's the reconciliation. So, for example, if you just hired a property appraiser, what they would do is they would look at what's selling around you, and that's considered the cost approach. Okay? Then there's this, I got it backwards. The sales comp analysis is where you compare properties that are selling that are close to you. So if your neighbor's, sells, and then they compare, did they have an added living area, a pool, or whatever, and then they adjust that to get to the sales comp analysis. The cost approach is more along the lines of what I do, which is the construction end of it. How much is it going to cost to build this? Okay, then depreciation. So what should happen is they take the cost approach, how much is it going to cost to build it, and then depreciate it if it's 20 years old, because obviously it's depreciated now, it's not worth what it would be the day that you built it. And then the sales comp analysis, and then they're supposed to do what's called a reconciliation and reconcile those two figures. And they're generally not too far off. What traditionally in the construction business that I'm in, and I've been in for a long time, is generally the only thing, it's just known in our world, that the only thing that actually appreciates in value is the land. Buildings, I don't care what kind of building it is, buildings depreciate. Land is the thing that appreciates. But what we have here, and I think this is contributing to a lot of the problems that we have in the real estate industry today, is because somebody has the idea that buildings appreciate. Buildings never appreciate, they always depreciate. So what should be happening in this entire process is the land should be appreciating either 3% or 1.5%, whatever, but the building that's on that should be depreciating. Okay, unless, of course, you go in and refurbish it or do whatever, but if it's just that same building that's been there for 20 years, it does not, buildings do not appreciate. And that's the big
I think, fallacy that's out there now. The only thing that really appreciates is the land, and that should be the only thing that's going up. And I think that's going to be that's causing a lot of these real estate issues right now. So that's kind of basically the overview of the statutes. Everything to do with the property appraiser is in the statute. And so basically, I'm not a property appraiser. Like I said, I'm in construction. I'm not a trained property appraiser. I do know what they are, and I do know how to read them, and I do know how they come about. But everything's pretty much laid out in the Florida statute as far as how the property appraiser, the county property appraiser, is supposed to appraise property. It's pretty cut and dried. It's all laid out. The problem is that they don't always go by it. In fact, when I had my issues, my property, just to give you some background.
Just for a second, in about 20 or 30 minutes, I'm going to shut the water off to the building, so anybody that's got to go to we got to do some plumbing, and you got to shut everything off to do it.
The government did it.
Yeah. So about 20 minutes, so if you got to go,
We'll wrap this up.
Everything cut off today.
The pressure's on.
Now everybody's anyway, I went into the property appraiser's office because my property taxes actually had gone up 30%. And that was kind of a shock for somebody who's been in their house for 20 years. So when I brought it to their attention and I said, you know, here's my property, it's homesteaded, here's the Constitution, and here's the laws, and it was only supposed to go up 1.5%. You know, can you tell me what's going on? And they basically looked at the Constitution, because I had a copy of the Constitution. They basically looked at the Constitution like it was some foreign object. Really, honestly, they looked at it like, and then they looked up and they looked at me straight in the eye and said, well, we don't go by the Constitution. Right, and I'm like thinking to myself, duh. But anyway, this is what happens when you have somebody in office for 36 years with the presumption of correctness. He doesn't have to go by the Constitution. Because the second comment was, it must be okay because nobody stopped us. Ed Havill, Mr. Ed Havill. Now, it wasn't him, it was his number 3 man. You see, that when you go to the property appraiser's office, they have them, they call themselves the number 1 man, the number 2 man, and the number 3 man. Or the number 3 man was the one that told me that. The number 2 man, his name is Frank Royce. And he's actually in the drop program as well. There's 4 people in the property appraiser's office that are in the drop program getting ready to double dip. Okay? And one of the reasons they want Ed to be reelected is because if he doesn't get reelected, that might mess up their double dipping plans. You see what I'm saying? So, and that's just the property appraiser's office. I don't know how many people are in the drop program and the rest of that board. Okay? But I can assure you that there's probably some more that don't want you to know. Okay. But Mr. Royce kind of the only one that does any work. I sent 5 emails, 2 or 3 letters, a couple phone calls to Mr. Havill, and he didn't answer one of them. I honestly don't know if he works or not. They say he does. But on these 600 petitions, his name's not on one of them. All right, so I don't know if he's just, the figurehead now or what, but basically Frank Royce is the one who does everything. And you didn't vote for him. Okay, he's getting ready to double dip. And that man, he's an interesting character, but basically when you call him, he just goes tough and hangs up. So seriously, well, they have the presumption of correctness. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Run for office? Okay. And educate people about what's going on. Here's another thing. The legislature is trying to help you. They really are. They came out with this bulletin, PTO 1110. They passed this law, HB 19, House Bill 19, where every constitutional officer, every one of your constitutional officers can voluntarily reduce their rate of pay. Okay? And so I'm going to voluntarily reduce my rate of pay to about $80,000, $85,000.
because the average employed person in this county makes approximately $43,000. So I think that to pay one constitutional officer $131,000 is a little much compared to the average salary of the people in this county. So I'm willing to do that. So you may want to question other constitutional candidates to see if anyone else that's running for election this year is willing to reduce their rate of pay. Let's see. I think I've covered just about everything. I just like this because this is the seal of Florida. In case you guys don't know, the seal of Florida was enacted in the 1800s, I think it was. But it was added as the seal. This is the seal, and you see at the bottom it says, "In God We Trust," kind of like that. And it was meant that the government is supposed to live up to these standards of behavior. But it's missing in a lot of government buildings. I would make sure that it's, I kind of feel like making wallpaper out of it and pasting it on all the walls myself, but, you know, that's just me. Does anybody have any questions?
We're shocked.
Did Washington D.C. teach this county how to run government, or did this county teach Washington? So they sound the same.
Which one comes first?
They are, and this is another scary part of the whole equation, so I'm glad you brought that up. Lake County is big, real big, on getting grants from the government. But whenever you get a grant for the government, you get a lot of strings attached. And for example, the OEC building that they're getting ready to use your money to build, I mean, it's not bad enough that they had to build another courthouse and, you know, grow themselves. I mean, you wonder why Lake County government's so big. Just look at how many times they built a courthouse in another building. You know, you go to some of these other smaller counties and they don't build buildings every 5 minutes like these people do. But a part of the OEC is they're getting grant money, okay? So they have to spend your money to get matching money. But the problem is that they got to spend more of your money to get a little bit of money. You know, my question to them was, there's 1,000 empty buildings. We can't just retrofit one? But in order to get the grant money, you have to build a brand new building. And it's just really interesting if you start looking into things and Googling things and just kind of meandering around the internet. It's really interesting that the same person who's building these courthouses all the time and can probably get the OEC contract too, that man lives in a really big house. Really big. I can't tell you what kind of place that guy lives in. Yes, sir.
From the conversation, from the talk we're doing this afternoon, is that I'm trying to figure it out that Lake County has got the same problem as the rest of the United States, that the officers are paid too much, everybody is overpaid, and it's being paid for by the people who are having a hard time, and they're sitting there with regardless Republican or Democrat, they're sitting there with their salaries of $131,000 to $200,000 a year, double dipping, and everything else like that. It seems like Lake counties have the same problem.
They do, and just like the federal government, not only, if that was just the problem, that might be manageable. But because they are so big, they're smothering the rest of us with all the regulations. Just like the federal government is smothering this. This country is being smothered by all the regulations. You can't even...
We're governed by the unelected.
Yes, yes. And so it's the regulations. Lake County is in deep with the federal government. There is information on the website, I don't know if I brought it with me today, that will explain how much money Lake County actually has in grant money that has been taken from the federal government, which means there's a lot of strings attached. And a part of those strings is a program called Agenda 21, which is a part of the United Nations global, you know, thing. But Lake County's in it pretty deep because of all the grant money that they're into, and Agenda 21 strings are all attached to that grant money that they go after like it's raw meat. Some of the other smaller counties have not gotten in that deep with all the grants that Lake County has, and so they have less regulation on what they can and can't do, besides a county like Lake, who's in really deep with the grants.
Why do
In
you want
keeping with your thoughts on,
based
talk
on
on,
what you think?
Well, wait, we have two people talking here.
in keeping with your discussion on how you're treated in Sumter County, I have some property out of town in Kentucky. I was treated the same way as you were. I had a problem. I'm going through the town. I think let's stop and get it cleared up right now. We walked in the assessor's office of Lake County, and bingo, it was all handled within 10 minutes. Otherwise, if I had gone on, I need a lawyer for this and a lawyer for that. I went in there and took care of it myself. They had 3 people in the office. Bingo, 1, 2, 3, and I was out.
Let me just go a little bit further with Sumter County, because when they came out there and we were talking about the property that I just bought out there, the gentleman's telling me, he's like, well, we know we have deadlines with the paperwork. He says, but don't worry about it. We'll accept the paperwork late. We really don't care. And he went on to tell me, he said, because to cause problems costs taxpayers money. We're very conscious about not increasing the cost to the taxpayers. And those 600 petitions all cost taxpayers money. In fact, I was talking to him about the petitions and the process and how much that process alone costs taxpayers. And he was like, and I threw a figure out, and he goes, no, ma'am, it's a lot more than that. So he said, we do everything we can. They had Sumter County, Lake County had 600 petitions. Okay, Sumter County had 47. Out of those 47, 2 of them were actually residential properties. None of the 47 actually went before a magistrate. They were all settled before that. Every one of them. They actually had 0 go from the value adjustment board, because the magistrates are paid $125 to $150 per hour to rubber stamp whatever the property appraiser said. So,
But what can you do if you are elected to change or to help it?
well, the first thing I'm going to do is just keep trying to educate people. Okay, for the first thing, I'm going to be more like Sumter County. I'm going to look to them for the model, and I'm not going to worry about paperwork deadlines or any of that. I'm going to make sure that people are educated as to what they need. If there's a problem, somebody gets their tier notice, and they have a problem with it, I'm going to say, come on in, we can solve this over a plate of cookies and a cup of coffee. Okay, because property owners are important to a county. I mean, you don't want to make property owners mad. Ed Havill will sit there, and if you ever see him in campaign, he's like, I'm fighting for you, I'm fighting for you. Really? Is he? No, the first thing that comes to my mind is there's only one person I know that keeps saying in this campaign, I'm fighting for you. And he's the current president of the United States, so that makes me a little But who's he fighting? If he's fighting for you, but you're the property owner, fighting other property businesses and property, and it's just costing taxpayers money, so his fighting is costing you money. This isn't about fighting anybody. This is about following the frickin' Constitution the way it's written, and if you don't like the way it's written, you petition to get it changed. And that's one thing that I would be doing, is I would be filing or talking to the legislatures and attempting to get more legislation passed to clean up what I see are problem areas in the system.
It looks like the double dipping thing could be handled by Alan Hayes and some of the others in a hurry, our state representatives.
They could, but they just nibble at the edges. See, it used to be a month, and now it's 6 months. So the legislature just kind of takes a problem, and then they kind of nibble at the edges. They don't really go in there and clean things up.
Including Rick Scott, including our governor.
I don't know about
That's
the
a pretty drastic thing. Okay, I just wondered.
I have a question on impact fees. Now, the county imposes impact fees.
It was actually the school board that, but the county also does too. But yes, the school board and the county can do impact fees, yes.
And the cities also.
Correct, yes.
Whoa.
Right, just depends on the Board of County Commissioners, these guys right here.
For those of you who don't know, I write a blog on fiscal issues for the county, so I attend a lot of meetings. And at a recent budget hearing that the county board had, they had a presentation by the staff, which is the county manager, talking about where they're going to cut costs. And he ended up coming up with a plan, which was, well, we're not going to cut more than 5% out of each department, and the constitutional officers, we're not going to cut them more than 5%. You know, I won't get into how much more it should be, but the issue is, then the alternative is to go to what's called the rollback rate on your taxes. If you're familiar with that, what that means is that they expect proper valuations by the appraiser's office to be dropped 5 to 8% this next year. But that will generate less income if you have the same tax millage rate. So what they want to do is have the same tax income as they had last year, and so they're going to increase the millage rate. And the county manager is saying right there, it's not going to cost anybody any more than they paid last year. Well, that's true, but what they're doing is they're basically hiking your tax rate, and you should be aware of that. And maybe you can talk about how the appraiser's office is going to affect all that.
Well, basically, that's done through the trim notice. Because when you get your tax bill and they have all these numbers on here, and unless you really study it, they don't mean anything to you because, you know, you got to put dinner on the table, or you got to go do this, you got to do that, you know, or the car needs fixing or something. There's always something going on. So basically, you just look at the bottom line and you go, okay, last year I paid this year I paid this. It's pretty close, so oh well. And you don't really look at it, but if there's the market value and the assessed values that are on here, so they can drop the market value and the assessed value and increase the millage rate, and then it looks like nothing has changed. But basically, they don't want to stop spending. That's the whole deal. They don't want to stop spending, and they just have all these wonderful projects in their head that's going to make life great for everybody, but what they don't understand is that the cost of all that is just going to smother them. My favorite founding father is Benjamin Franklin. Remember when he's on the $100 bill, which I just adore. He has some really great insights, and one of my favorite quotes by the man, and this is my version of it because he spoke completely differently. But my favorite quote from him is, if you continue to spend money on what you want, soon you will not have money to pay for what you need. These people have no clue what it's like to stop spending. Okay, number one, they don't have to. Their salaries are just the same. They haven't been, you know, laid off from a company who went under. I have. Okay, you know, it's different for they're in a different world, completely different world. Yeah, here we are working day in, day out, trying to put food on the table and raise our families, and here they are, they're just not following the Constitution, they're spending like crazy. I guarantee you that, and here's the budget for every one of these, their budget is up here. And one of the things we were looking at earlier was the non-departmental is 18.5% of the budget. So 18.5% of their entire budget, this isn't even on here. That's a pretty large chunk, considering the property appraiser, his $2 million budget is 0.6%. So you have to wonder where Vance and I are doing a little investigating, because as I was looking through some things, we came across the fleet of automobiles, which the list of fleet of automobiles that you own is astronomical. You own several car lots full of vehicles. Now, one vehicle just jumped out at me. And I'm like, this is strange. There's a Crown Vic. The Crown Vic was a 97 Crown Vic that's used $484,000 in fuel. That's not possible. I don't care if you're standing there at the pump and there's a hole in the bottom of the tank and you just keep pumping. You can't do it. Okay? It's not physically possible to have one car use $484,000 in fuel. So, and then when I asked about it, I'm like, because I'm asking about the cars that the property appraiser owns. You know, the property appraiser owns vehicles. And I'm asking about it, you know, because as a business owner, you you have to pay your taxes by law, you have to track your odometer in the morning, your odometer at night, where you've been, what job site you went to, blah, 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 right? So I'm thinking, hey, it's gonna be the same over here, right? No. I'm told all the vehicles are on the honor system. So, yes, sir.
I'd like to ask one question. Say if you got elected and you went into office, and you would sit there and you would come in, you have a staff, you have everything there to sit there. Would you have the authority to cut, like say, if automatically this morning you're sworn in, you go sit down at your desk, I'm cutting the staff by 10, I'm cutting my budget 10%. Get your staff to work it out and everything else like that. Do you have that authority on your own?
Oh,
You
yeah.
have to go
Oh,
to
yeah.
town?
No, the property appraiser has total authority to do whatever they want with their office. The only thing that the state has oversight on is to make sure that the tax rolls are to standards. That's all. But, yeah, I could go in there. One of the things that
But are you willing to cut, if you walk in, say, 10% of your, say, 10% of the staff?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, but it's not all staff. See, here's the thing about the staff, okay? I won't have to cut much, because the top 4, which are the ones getting ready to go into the drop program, they're the ones making 100 plus, okay? So if I just got rid of 4 people, the budget would dramatically drop by $400,000, boom, like that, without anything. And they're all going to retire anyway, right? You know, they're all signed on the dotted line.
They wouldn't even miss
it. We're not going to miss it. And the lower people, the ones that do the actual work, they're only making $20,000, $25,000 a year. They're making hardly. It's the top. It's the top tier. And if I just reconstructed everything and let the people retire who've already signed up to retire, let them go on their little retirement little merry ways, the budget would be cut severely at that point. And then what I would do is institute. The first thing that I want to do is a complete procedural audit, process audit, which has never been done. I want to make sure that whatever they're doing is in accordance to the law. That would be my first mission. And then I would be looking for duplication of effort, ways to streamline. That's what a procedural process audit would do. Just like if you were a business, you'd be looking for ways. So whatever that audit recommended, I would probably adopt, you know, because I would watch the whole process and make sure, but I'm sure there's a ton of ways that could be eliminated without even eliminating the personnel, but just by doing the processes different, and maybe putting people in different positions based on the processing. But I guarantee you that there's duplicity of effort and all kinds of things in this mix.
You're more than welcome to stay and talk. We'll have an intermission for anybody that needs to use the facility, because you got about 3 minutes before you cut the water off. Mr. Juan, do whatever you need to do, and come on back, we'll continue.
I'm not afraid.
Am I the only one?
No,
You're the third. There's 12 people already went
Cost in your department, can they switch that money to the buses for the school board, because they're crying about school buses.
Get water in the kitchen, I'll fill your eyes.
The process is actually this, okay, by legislature, which is another kind of little flaw that I don't really agree with the system, but by law, legislatively, the property appraiser and the tax collector actually take commission on the tax.
Where are we at?
But what they don't spend goes back for the county to,
Well,
the county
there's a
to
need.
use in other areas.
There's a need.
Now, I don't know if they would be able to switch that to the school board or not, but they definitely, the money would go back into the system, whatever's not used. But one of the things that concerns me, and as the constitutional officers, I would put into legislation, or try and get it enacted in legislation, to have a plan where the constitutional officers are mandated by law that if they see something funny going on in another area, they are mandated to report it. Right now, you have, in the property appraiser's office, you have the anonymous abuse program. So if you think your neighbor is abusing the system by claiming homestead, they don't live there or whatever, you can turn in your neighbor anonymously, and then, believe me, they'll go after them, okay, whether it's founded or not. Why don't we have that same program in our government? But right now, what's happening is you go to the tax collector, for example, right? And you're like, dude, they're not going by the Constitution. He's like, I don't look over on that side. I don't look over there. And I think that legislatively, we should have a requirement that if one of these constitutional officers, because they're supposed to be following the Constitution, that's why they call them constitutional officers, to make sure that Constitution is being followed. So if, for example, the sheriff or the supervisor of election looks over here and sees that the property appraiser is not following the Constitution, it should be mandatory that they go to the legislature and report this to the oversight division. Why is it that they just don't have the ability to turn their head like nothing's going on?
Well, they tell you it costs too much to investigate and to hold hearings.
But I think they should be just as culpable as the other person.
You're right, but I'm saying they find some legitimate.
Well, we gotta clean it up somehow, and if it's okay for you to, they thrive. He thrives on people turning in their neighbors. But I bet you if one of these people turned him in, that'd be a different story now, wouldn't it? But these are just things that concern me. Any other questions?
Yeah,
Yes.
these 4 people at the top, what if they decide not to retire? What are you gonna do with them?
Well, here's the beauty of the drop program. I would have to rehire them. In other words, once they've stated, where is the drop program? They fill out a piece of paper stating that they are going to retire. One of these. And once they sign that piece of paper, they have to retire within 60 months, period, the end. And then they have a date, says this is your drop date. The way they get back in is they get rehired. You see,
Well, what if you didn't rehire them? That's what
they
you
get their watch and they get a nice party and
Let's do it. So
Actually,
that'll be
you could fire them, you could terminate them, you have that power.
right. Plus you can terminate. Yeah, it's not mandatory that they. But it's not.
Would they be rehired?
Yeah, it's not. Or even they can be dropped right now. They can be terminated right now. But here's the one for Frank Royce. This is the one he filled out. Drop termination and resignation date is 11/30/2013. But I guarantee you that if Ed Havill gets reelected, he's going to drop, but he's going to come back. I guarantee you that.
After 30 days, just 30 days.
Well, it used to be 30 days. Now, I don't know if they're grandfathered in, if they sign the
If
drop.
they're
before
already
they
in it, I don't know,
change.
6 months or,
There's the thing about now it's 6 months, but I don't know if that affects somebody who signed a couple years ago. So I don't know. They would know. They know. I'm sure they know.
For your information, I was at Plantation when Pam and Frank were discussing this, and Frank assured everybody that it wasn't against the law, and he fully intended to take advantage of it, just so you know. I was there when that happened.
It was funny too. Do you remember who?
Oh, I remember a lot about that.
And he's sitting right next to me, and every time I say something, he goes, "Shut up! Shut up! Shut up!" Right in front of a room full of people. They're clapbacks, I tell you. Any other questions?
Who set up the drop program?
The legislature did.
Yeah, and that's covered their, all these ads.
Well, if you talk to the legislature, it was never intended for constitutional officers. But just like any law, there's the unintended consequences. So these are the unintended consequences of what they thought at the time was a good idea.
Well, rescind it.
Needs to be changed.
Oh, it's a loophole, somebody found
That's a loophole to the
Yes.
law.
Yes, they did find a loophole. Yes, ma'am.
What can any of us do to open this up?
replace Ed Havill.
Well, the first thing is get out there. I don't know. I'm sure the Republican Club has a lot of ways that you can become involved. The main thing is you need to replace Ed Havill, which is going to be extremely difficult to do. Okay? But just about any candidate but him will be better. Now, how much better? That part I don't really know. Okay? I can't tell you that part. I mean, I know what I would do, but there are 4 candidates. So, I don't know exactly I think I'm the only one that's voluntarily gonna reduce my salary. That much I do know. The other one is Mr. Price, Walter Price, and he is a certified appraiser. And when it comes to appraising property, I don't think there's anybody better than him. But my question is does he know the law? Because this position is not really about appraising property so much as it is following the law, because the law is pretty straightforward and strict, and it's in the box, and that's it. So, and then the other candidate is former Senator Kerry Baker, and he knows more about the law part, but he is a politician. And I think he was one of the ones that instituted the drop program. So, you know, but Ed Havill needs to go, basically needs to go. And then from that point on, I would just say that just get actively involved, do what Vance and I do, and get in there and start digging, and start digging, and start digging. And
Peaceful protest in front of one of the new courthouses.
well, you just need, you need to dig out all the information, like when I found the part about the cars, right? And then I call him and I'm like, you know, I've got this car, $484,000 in fuel. Can you explain that to me? Oh, we'll get back with you. So I call him 2 weeks later. Did you find anything out yet? We'll get back with you.
I have an answer.
You have an update?
I went through the county manager.
Okay.
And I did get an answer, and the guy said, well, that must be a typo. And then he said the car had been sold. And so my question is, if that's the report that they're giving out to people saying, this is how we track and manage our vehicle fleet, that tells you that they don't really give a darn about the accuracy. They didn't run any kind of performance ratios like a fuel mileage rate. And I pulled all these vehicles in, and then I sorted it, which they did not do, by high mileage and by high maintenance costs. And you got some that had really atrocious vehicle mileage based upon the fuel cost that was entered in there since the life of the vehicle. And I have to schedule a meeting with the guy, but it tells me that they don't care. They just don't care about, they don't have anybody that's sitting there and looking at that. And I worked as a corporate auditor in major companies, Fortune 500 companies, and fleet operations would always be tracking things like that. You wanted to know, for instance, that for some reason we bought 3 times as many batteries as the number of vehicles we have. And I actually found that as an auditor, and that's because they were going out the back door. And you run ratios and statistics like that to track that stuff. There is no corporate controller over these county operations. They have an accounting department, but not a controller that looks at cost analysis. They do not have performance audits because there is only one auditor. He works in the county clerk. And they found a court case that said, well, you can't really initiate audits of other departments like these without approval, and magically there hasn't been any approval in years. And none of the constitutional officers have ever had a performance audit, which is efficiency, effectiveness, economy. And that was my professional background. That's why I got into that. And so there's a lot of things when you're looking at a $100 million operation, and compared to companies I've been at that have been about the same size, actually, or we had divisions, they have much more sophisticated cost analysis and things to prevent, you know, like when she first told me about that, I had been in an oil company where we found a similar thing, and that's because the unions were supposed to get so much work done, and they cost 4 times as much in Alaska on the oil pipeline per hour. And so if they didn't have anything to do for the last 2 hours, they'd bill it to this bashed up truck sitting in the corner. And then also somebody might be charging their gasoline in a pump to vehicle 485, and after a while the word got out and all the fuel was being charged to it because nobody was looking at it until somebody started asking those questions. But you don't find them doing that here in the government, and that's the one, and the school board is the same way. It drives me nuts.
In fact, there was one of the magistrates when I was looking through the list. One of the magistrates billed the county $400 plus per day for the day before Thanksgiving, Thanksgiving Day, the day after Thanksgiving, and that Saturday. Now, before I paid that invoice, I probably would have questioned why she was working on a government holiday, right?
Thinking 400 a day.
A day. Yeah, she billed for those 4 days, I think she billed for over $1,200. And they just wrote her a check. They didn't even, oh, look, Thanksgiving Day, oh well.
What was her job? Was she an attorney or something?
She's looking over those 600 petitions. She gets paid $125 to $150 an hour to look over each. There's 4 magistrates, and they each get a stack of those 600. And then, so I guess she just decided to do it over the Thanksgiving holiday, which, I mean, I just kind of question that as why are you doing that on a federal holiday, right, or government holiday, and doing government work on a government holiday? I don't know, it didn't make any sense to
Well,
me
do
either.
the county commissioners have any way to change any of these things?
They don't
You
have
know,
control.
we vote for them directly,
But you vote for the constitutional officers also directly, and they are independent. They just, you know.
In other words, the county commissioners don't have any control over what these
No.
other groups are doing.
An example is the sheriff has refused to drop his budget since the peak in 2007. He only was forced last year to drop it by 5%, and this year they're scheduling 5%. Meanwhile, the county board operations, which is the whole right side of that board up there, has reduced their staffing and their dollar budget by about 40%. And so he's only dropped 10%. So his share of the total pie of the budget is now much larger, and they can't control. They can ask him, and they have. I've sat there for 2 years and watched. And they'll go ask him. He doesn't publish his budget on the website at all, not even a summary. And he's not accountable to anybody.
In other words, the county commissioners can't make any of these people
No.
or initiate.
At the most, they try and lobby and go
in.
in, and Welton Cadwell did last year. This year, it's, I think, Sean Parks, and he's the weakest and the least experienced on the board. Plus, he loves the sheriff, so I don't think that went very far. And so, unless the public throws out the sheriff, and frankly, because he has an opponent that maybe isn't as good anyway, unless the public starts asking him questions in public forums and stuff, and embarrasses him. I printed out a bunch of things on my blog, but he hasn't done it. I've asked him in forums like this, when he was elected 4 years ago, if he would have a performance audit. He says, oh yeah, sure, publicly. Never did it. And so we had no idea, plus he gets a lot of drug forfeiture money, vehicles, houses, and other things. There's no accounting for it. You don't know. I've been told by people on the inside, though, that he's a lot more honest maybe than, the previous sheriff also was, the one that got killed in the bus accident. But before that, apparently there's a lot of history of money going out the doors and stuff. So I'm not saying that he's unethical or anything. I'm just saying that they keep that money, hang on to it, and they spend it on toys. They got a lot of new boats, helicopters, new sheriff's vehicles, a $300,000 assault vehicle, and other things like that. I'm not running for office, so let her talk.
But one thing as a Republican club, one thing that I would suggest to you is make sure that you run as many candidates for that office as you can, and then force them all to have forums. But to allow to have a county like this that's just about 99% Republican, that to just have the same incumbent running time after time after time, I think the Republican club needs to clean up its own little thing and make sure that you don't continue running the same candidate unopposed year after year after year, because that's where they get entrenched at, and that's where they just get their egos all blown up about it, and then they just spend your money like crazy. If there's opposition, then they might straighten up and do better. But when they know that they can run unopposed for 36 years, what do they care?
Well, in Indiana,
Yeah.
The Luger.
You have a group up there, it's called Fiscal and Administrative Services. Is that a department that ought to be overseeing or holding people accountable for these things we're talking about?
They're
Your
purely,
fiscal and administrative services, what do they do?
they're financial accountants, they're not performance accountants or
Okay,
cost analysis. So they basically look at everything as a budget, and you got a budget of $3 million for, say, overtime in the fire department, and and hopefully you don't go over, and actually, about 4 years ago, fire department went $1 million over the budget because they have accountants in there not running the kind of things that are very common in business to detect and prevent you from doing things like going $1 million over your overtime budget before it gets caught. And that actually happened about 4
so
years
there's
ago.
not really the system anywhere in that
No,
chart
this is it, right
to
there, that's it.
make people accountable.
The voters.
That's it, that's all there is.
We could-
But we can't actually be the people that go in there and like every year they ought to have, like you'd be running a business.
Right.
They're turning in their expenses and their, with their budget.
If you
and
start
whatever.
showing up at the county commission meetings, like large numbers of people, and then listening to people like Vance, who are coming out with, him and I are going to a watchdog thing this weekend to learn more about how to be a watchdog, but you can, everything is requestable. I had to put in a lot of freedom of information to get a lot of documents out of them, but if you persist enough, you will get that information, and the more you dig, the more you're going to find out, and then you just have to keep hammering them and keep their feet to the fire, because they do want to be reelected, right? But, you know, you just can't make it easy. You can't just give it to them because they're unopposed every year.
We tried a couple of years ago with people running for the board to get one person on there that had a business background, that had actually been in real estate or bought, sold, and understood what businesses go through, because we have had an experience with someone we know who's had a piece of property they built like a strip mall, and it took them 2 years to get a water permit, and they've dragged them on so to finally, of course, it's gone into bankruptcy. So the whole system, nobody would cooperate, and we were hoping this one person would get on the county board that had a business background, but of course he didn't make it. But we don't actually seem to have anybody on our board of commissioners. They're either environmentalists or they're activists or they've got some, but nobody that sees has a sound economic business
because
approach to the
you would
thing.
never run a business the way they run business.
No.
Number one, the government the federal government wouldn't allow you to run a business the way they run business. That's the first thing.
I'm not sure if you're in the new or the old district that runs down the west side of the county for county commission, but Tim Sullivan, who is running, he's a former brigadier general and vice president Prudential, he's running unopposed. I don't know for sure, I don't think you, maybe you are south enough, you're in the new district for him, but he doesn't have any opposition, but actually I just happened to have been talking to him for a couple hours yesterday, and I mean, he does have that background.
Well, he's going to be our speaker here next month, and we'll be ready. What we've heard from you, maybe we can have some questions we'd like to ask him, what he plans to do.
By our question.
Yeah, because what he thinks he could do if he got elected to change or do any of this. So I guess you're going to help us build fires, but...
Well, you get to vote for all the commissioners. One thing you can always do is just vote against them. You know, but always make sure that the other candidate isn't worse.
Yeah.
That's the problem, is sometimes
Okay,
That's how we got that
Pam,
guy.
wrap this up. We have any more questions for Pam?
All right, well, thank you all very, very much. I really appreciate it.